Good evening, everyone. My name is Neil Levesque, and I'm the Executive Director here at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, New Hampshire's Home for Politics. This institute is run on the private donations of many different groups, and without them, we wouldn't be able to do this so many times right now, actually. I think I've seen many of you here probably several times just in the last month. So tonight's event, special event, is made possible by Kinder Morgan. It's a great sponsor for us. They've been very helpful to us, and many of the great programs we've been able to put on this fall have been through their kindness, so appreciate that. For purposes of introduction, of course, we have one of our wonderful St. Anselm students, Tom Mannion from Dorchester, Massachusetts.
Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to this evening's event. My name is Thomas Mannion. I'm a sophomore politics and business major. Tonight, I have the distinct honor of introducing Mr. John King. John King is CNN's chief national correspondent and anchor of Inside Politics, a 30-minute Sunday morning program featuring a panel of top-tier political correspondents. He's an award-winning journalist who has covered the past 7 presidential elections and reported from all 50 states and over 70 countries. In his role as chief national correspondent, Mr. King is instrumental in CNN's daily reporting and breaking news coverage. Most recently, Mr. King was a prominent part of Network's 2014 Election Night in America coverage, offering insight and analysis throughout the evening. As part of CNN's America's Choice 2012 election, Mr. King reported from the Trail and moderated 3 presidential primary debates. His analysis and use of the magical wall to virtually bring the results and their impact to viewers was an integral part of the network's Emmy Award-winning 2012 election night coverage. He previously anchored John King USA, and in January 2009, he launched State of the Union with John King, the network's Sunday political news program, visiting 50 states in 52 weeks, that chronicled the first year of the Obama presidency. Mr. King is a native of Boston's Dorchester neighborhood and earned a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Rhode Island. He also has been awarded honorary doctorate degrees from URI and Hobart and William Smith colleges. So on behalf of the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, I'd like to welcome Mr. John Wood.
Slide. I don't know how we're going to go back to that. And do you know the secret of how I go backwards?
Yeah.
Does this go backwards for me?
Yep.
Look at that. See? Magic wall, little mouse. We can figure this out. How are you? Great. Thanks for having me. They told me they wanted me to come, and I said, great. I get to come where people talk normal and root for the right teams. And I get to leave the world's least important dysfunctional city and get to New Hampshire for a couple of days. Occasionally swing through Boston maybe and say hello to some family. And then they told me I actually had to say something. I thought I was just coming, saying hello. So they told me I had to say something. And so we came up with this fancy title. What do you think? A Year of Disruption. How the Surprises of 2015 Reshaped the 2016 campaign. Now, one thing I am not, and a few of you know me, one thing I'm not is somebody who gives speeches. I'm not very good at it. But I hope and I know that you'll have a lot of questions, because one of the things I love about coming to this state and to this campus is that you have a unique tradition, and some people call it cliche, and some people think it's outdated, and some people think it should be taken away from you. I happen to think it's one of America's great gifts. And sure, maybe things need to be tinkered with from time to time, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think that's true of this state. And I think especially as we go through this presentation, when we're done and I take your questions, I think we're actually about to find out, whether in this new world, with the technology, with one of the disruptive candidates who's driving a lot of the race right now, whether the old way matters as much, and whether this year might be an exception, whether this year will swing back to the old ways of retail politicking and doing the town halls, whether we might either we go back, we have a 1-year exception, or whether it changes dramatically. I don't think we know the answer to that, but I think in some ways we're about to find out. So let me go through these slides, and please, I'm pretty low maintenance, feel free to interrupt me. I will not take offense. I'll actually take pleasure. If you stop me and interrupt me and say, what do you mean by that? We don't have to have any rules here. So what do I mean by this? Ann and I came up with this title because Ann said I had to have a title. I think she needed something to say, he's coming to talk about these big, lofty things. But I do think this is a good way to characterize where we are now. 10 weeks, people start voting, actually. We've been talking about this race for a long time. The preseason's about to be over, and we're about to have some fun. But we have had a lot of disruption in 2015, and I think the big question is, how does it affect the actual race when we get to it? So let me get to this. Thomas tried to jump the gun on me here. Let's define disruption. So many things have happened this year, including just in the last couple of days, that we could have a very long list about disruptive forces in our politics. Here are a few I want to start with, and then when we talk in the Q&A after, for as long as you'd like, we can get to more of it. But I think one of the biggest dynamics is Trump and the rise of the outsider. It's not just Donald Trump. It's Ben Carson. It is, at least for a brief period of time, it was Carly Fiorina. And I think on the Democratic side, you could also say Bernie Sanders, who's having an impact in this race. Who, early on, I'm a sinner. When Trump said he was going to run again, I said, right, been there, done that, see this movie before, know how it's going to end, and then he ran. I know a lot of people didn't take him seriously. Hi, Cassie. Well, this is CNN's New Hampshire Bureau, the talented future star, current star Cassie Kodak. If you don't know her now, you soon will. And I'm one of the idiots who did not take him seriously at the beginning. And once he said he was running, he deserved the respect that we give every candidate, whether you agree with him or disagree with him. And my business did not do that for a couple of weeks. And that was a mistake. Once he said he was going to run, we have to stop, reset, and treat him with the dignity and respect we would treat any candidate for president. He put himself in the arena, he should be treated as a candidate for president. And we didn't do that for a couple of weeks. And we paid the price, because then all of a sudden he was able to laugh at us and say, I'm winning. So there's the outsider effect that I think we should talk about. There's also the celebrity effect. Trump is treated differently, and he campaigns differently, and he benefits, and perhaps someday he'll pay a price for this. Someday it might hurt him as well. But he's different, because he is a celebrity. He's our first reality TV star candidate. I don't say that as a criticism, it's just a fact. And he uses it to his advantage. He knows how to brand himself and how to do the marketing and he understands ratings and television. One major candidate is a socialist. Some of you are old enough, to think about this. There's a guy running for president of the United States who says he's a democratic socialist. He gave a speech about it today to explain what he meant by that. There was a time when that was disqualifying. That made you a fringe, that put you over with Linda LaRouche somewhere. The pride of New Hampshire, right? Thanks for that. Yeah. But he's a serious player. He's an incredibly serious player in this race, and an impact player in the race, even if he doesn't win the nomination. Another disruptive question, I think, that's being put forward in this campaign that doesn't get as much attention as I think it might later on, is that with most of these candidates, the country's being asked to do something that it traditionally doesn't do, which is go back a generation in picking a leader. So we almost always go forward. Elections are, George can get up and sing the song for you if you want. Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Elections are about tomorrow. They are about tomorrow. They're about the future. And we've had 3 consecutive, very young, 2-term presidents. And now we have a field of candidates, with some exceptions, that are asking us to go back. And it's out of character for the country to do that. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but it's out of character for the country to do that. The thing I obsess about most in life is the changing demographics of this country. And because there are so many compelling personalities in this race, I don't think my business has spent as much time as it should on explaining to people, and many of you know this, but one of the knocks on New Hampshire is, why does this lily white, largely more rural or less urban state get to have so much impact on presidential politics? I think your role is just fine. But it is a lesson to somebody like me when you travel the country. I started doing this in 87, 88, covering Governor Dukakis, starting there. This is number 8 for me, and it is amazing when you go back to the places you've been before, how much this country is changing literally as we speak, and how that is affecting our politics. And how it is affecting, George Bruno was just telling me, he's working on a lot of immigration law, people's views on immigration, people's views on jobs and economics. If you are economically anxious, it affects your views on race and immigration and all these issues. And the changing demographics are bringing out some things that are not so nice and not so good, and other things that are just interesting in the dynamics we have to think about. But without a doubt, they're changing our politics in a huge way. And The last thing I would say is that everybody wants change. One of the disruptive forces in this electorate is if we're back in a 2007-2008 cycle. Everybody wants change, from the far left to the far right. They just don't define change, it's the same thing. So let's go through some of these quickly, and then I want to take your questions. I don't want to stand here yakking all day. To Trump and the outsiders, again, my business was wrong about this at the beginning. We didn't take him seriously, and the people are speaking. They want something very different, to the point that they're willing to consider a guy who is a performer. You could use a different term. You could use a more pejorative term, a more colorful term, whatever you want. Whether you love him or don't like him, he's an entertainer in many ways. But he's also a serious candidate for president. There's just another poll out today that shows he's in the lead nationally, and he's in the lead right here in this state. And there are these people who, the aware smart people from Washington, who keep saying, well, he's going to get out before Iowa. Huh? It's like Belichick, I was just joking, it's like Belichick calling news comes from, okay, we're 9-0, we quit. We're not going to play the rest of the season. No, he's not getting out. He's doing just fine. There might have been a point where he thought this was a temporary idea, but he's not going anywhere. If you look at Trump and Carson and add up their numbers, two guys who've never held elective office, they are at 40 or 50%, depending on which poll you look at. But if you look at the national polls and most state polls, anywhere from usually mid-40s to low 50% are in their basket. So if you're one of the other candidates and you need to win, sure, you can take a vote from Governor Kasich, you can take a couple votes from Governor Christie, you can get some votes from Carly Fiorina or Jeb Bush, but if you want to move, you want to, this is like robbing a bank. I mean, you got to go where the money is, and that's where the money is. And so if those two stay there in a crowded race, that's huge. They're holding half the votes. In some cases, a little bit more of that. And that's a huge, interesting dynamic. The last part is what strikes me about the mood of the electorate. Governor used to be the gold standard in presidential politics. Governor Reagan became president. Governor Clinton became president. Governor Bush became president. Governor Dukakis was your nominee. Governor Jindal just got out. Governor Walker went before him. Think about that. Think about that. Scott Walker was the darling of the conservative movement. He was the guy who was winning during the Obama presidency. He was one of their icons. Gone. Governor Perry, again, did not perform terribly well on the stage, but an accomplished several-term governor of one of our largest states, and a damn good retail politician. I know he was not a good debater in the last cycle, and he had some horrible moments, but an impressive guy, one and a very good retail politician. Gone. If you have a title, it's a liability. It's a liability in politics today. And that's, if you have a title, you're part of the problem, and people think that the system is broken right now. I want to stay on this for a minute, because the reason I believe that this is happening is because the electorate is so restless and so disappointed. It's a range of negative emotions. We make a mistake sometimes in my business of saying it's an angry electorate. If you're angry about something, think about your own emotions. If you're angry about something, it's more visceral and you can see it. Sometimes you're disappointed. Sometimes you're frustrated. It's a negative emotion, but it's more quiet. So you don't see it as much. You might actually hide it. You might not want people to see it. But there's a mix of negative emotions. 64% of the country, so nearly 2/3 of Americans. That's a lot of Democrats, that's a lot of Republicans, and a lot of independents. You can't get into the mid-60s without it being everybody. It's everybody. I think the country's on the wrong track, and they've thought that now for more than a decade. That's the number that when the professionals who understand public opinion data look at this, that's what gets them. They have thought this now for more than a decade. The cement is hardening. Try telling them we have 5% unemployment. Try telling them the economy's coming back. They don't believe it, and they have good reason. And any of you who've been living through the last 10 years, you know why. I'm sure many of you, maybe you're doing better. Maybe your 401k is back to where it was. Maybe your investments have rebounded, to a point where you can finally exhale. But you're looking over your shoulder a lot, aren't you? You're worried it's going to happen again, and you remember how painful that was and how scary that was. People, you cannot convince them things are getting better. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are born of this. 7 in 10 Americans they say they're angry. They use that word, angry, because they think the political system is rigged to benefit Wall Street, to benefit the big donors, to benefit the insiders, and to screw them. Excuse my language, but that's how they feel about it. That the system is rigged not just to help the wealthy, but to screw them. That it's not just to help them and, ignore you, but there's a trade-off involved. That's what they think. That it doesn't just happen by accident, that it's happening on purpose. And as I said earlier, if you look at the questions the professionals look at to how restless are people, how much do they want change, it's pretty equal to 2007 and 2008. Some are higher, some are a little lower, but if you average them out, when the country did something pretty dramatic, something a lot of us of my age or older who were in this room, I never thought we'd elect black president in my lifetime. Not 20 years ago, I didn't. And we did, because people want to change, and they were going to get change. They were not going to be denied change. The result is disruption, and for a guy like me, who says, I've done this 7 times before, of course I know what I'm talking about. Forget about it. You know, the old rules and the old history, they're helpful, but they are not your guiding light this cycle. This is a different campaign year, and we have to understand that. And you know, yes, trust your instincts, and yes, remember your history, but don't think that because it happened this way last time, it's going to happen this way this time. I think we're in a very different year. Now I want to get into the celebrity effect, which I think is a huge part of why Trump is so successful. Anybody else here hosted Saturday Night Live? You know, he's not just a guest on the program, as Hillary Clinton was, and as many politicians will be. He hosted the program, and he was in just about every skit. You know, like some people say he wasn't presidential. You know, everybody here gets 1 vote, and you're entitled to your opinion. Some people thought it was, hey, I think it was very funny. The show was all that funny that night, but it got record ratings for Saturday Night Live. He was everywhere. He was having fun, and he's just different, and he gets processed differently by voters because they're just used to seeing him in these different settings. We allow him, my business, and we talk about pros and cons of whether this is right or wrong, to phone it in, literally, to phone it in. Donald Trump does Meet the Press and State of the Union and Good Morning America and Today and New Day. I'm not trying to single anybody out because he does everybody, for all we know, in his boxer shorts or in his pajamas on the telephone. We don't let other candidates do that. We don't. In a breaking news situation, we do. It's a hurricane, you know, the governor of Oklahoma, you know, or a tornado, the governor of Oklahoma gets to call in on the phone. But we don't let candidates do this. But we let him do it. And he uses it to his advantage. You're looking at me. You know, if I start to bore you, you're going to know. If I say something, if you think I'm making it up, you're going to see it. We're having a conversation. We can look each other in the eye. That's how relationships grow. That's how you learn whether or not you trust somebody. A lot of the big things he does, he's not in the room. You can't see him. It's a different standard. To some degree, he deserves to be treated differently. But to some degree, I would argue, my business is taking this too far. He gets coverage across all platforms. He's not just on CNN. He's not just on MUR. He's not just on the political blogs. He owns golf courses. He's on the sports pages. He's a reality TV star. Watch Access Hollywood. Go online and look at the entertainment blogs. Trump is everywhere. Your other candidates are locked into what they get. This is where they get their coverage. They either get it or they don't. If Trump's not getting covered in the political sphere today, I will bet you every dime I have in my pocket, he's somewhere else in the media. He just opened a new golf course. He's just did a TV show. Someone's writing about the ratings and how it's all about Donald Trump. He is everywhere, and it affects how it matters. The other candidates complain about this all the time, especially the phoning in part, and why we spend so much time on him. I think it's debatable, and we'll see when people start voting what happens. Are some of them benefiting from it? Would 24 million people have watched a Republican debate without Donald Trump? So do more people know the other candidates because of Trump? I think that's certainly true, they do. So do they benefit some even though they suffer some? I think that's one of the big debates going on right now. Like him or not, he understands what his audience wants. The practice he got, if you talk to people who, my current boss at CNN, who runs the news network now, was a big player at NBC when Trump started The Apprentice, Celebrity Apprentice, and you know, they had a debate about who to have host the show. People inside NBC will tell you Trump wasn't very good at it at first, and I don't mean that as a criticism. I remember when I switched from print to television. You know, it's hard, but because he's driven and because he's a competitive person, he became better and better at it. He knows what he's doing. He understands ratings. He understands audiences. He understands the push points, the pressure points. When he says he's going to build a wall, some of you may like that, some of you may not like that. He knows who he's talking to. One of the things we did not do early on is give him enough credit of understanding and of doing some homework. You cannot, again, whether you like him or not, you cannot make all that money and sign all those deals and build all those buildings and build all those places in so many different countries that have different sets of rules without having negotiating skills and having at least, you know, having some relationship skills. And the television experience makes him a pretty unique figure as a political figure in our country. We've never had this before. He gets it. And you see him now calibrating. Sometimes all of a sudden he's kinder, gentler for a few days. You know, whoa, what happened to the belligerent, bellicose, you're stupid, you're an idiot. And then that comes back. And then that comes back. He goes back and forth. And if you look at when polling is released, his ebbs and flows tend to follow data. He sees his negatives are up, he becomes more peaceful for a few days. He sees somebody whacking him on some place where it could have effect, because it affects his relationship with his slice of the electorate that he's going for, then all of a sudden he's on Twitter, calling you stupid and getting in your face. Whether it works or not, we'll see, but he knows what he's doing. My question about Trump is, he has owned. He is the chief disruptor. He has owned 2015. But as we move into 2016, to use a TV term, the voters, the viewers, consumers want him back for a second season. I hope you can see this. This is why I asked this question. This is from a McClatchy-Marist poll. The more you hear, the more you like these candidates, or you're unsure, or the more you hear, the less you like. The reason Rubio has such an upside, 6 in 10 Republicans say the more they hear, the more they like. Ben Carson, nearly 70%, 67%. The more they hear, the more they like. Now, we'll see if this changes. This is a couple weeks old now. You see the dates up here, or October 29th and November 4th, so it's relatively new. We'll see if it changes as the debates go on, and Carson's case, his biography is in the news. But if you look at Trump, can he grow? He has a base of support, 44%. That's pretty good. With 14 candidates, or, we'll see how many we get by the election day in New Hampshire. That's not bad. But 49% say the more they hear, the less they like. So does he have a ceiling? If you're Governor Bush, I'm talking about Trump right now, but if you're Governor Bush, that's a pretty horrible number. 6 in 10 Republicans say the more they hear, the less they like. It makes it hard to grow. It makes it hard to come back when people don't want to listen to you. Here's another way to look at it. Who would you definitely not support? 37% of Republicans and independents who lean Republican. And that's an important factor here in this state, because so many people are undeclared. So people, independents who lean Republican are most likely to vote in the Republican primary. 37%, so nearly 4 in 10 say they would never vote for Donald Trump. It makes it hard to grow. Now again, there's 14 candidates on the ballot. It's okay. That's okay. You can get your, somewhere in the ballpark of 30%, and you're winning. You're in a two-man or a three-man race, three-candidate race. Well, if you're in it, that gets more interesting if you can't change that number. So keep an eye on that. And it breaks down. Even though this is the thing that fascinates me about Trump. This is a guy who has spoken in favor of single-payer health care. He gave Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi not a lot of money, but he gave them money in 2006, the year the Democrats were taking back control of Congress. Republicans weren't supposed to like that, right? He says the economy does better under Democrats. He has a sister who's a federal judge who supports abortion rights. He says she'd be great in the Supreme Court. He's the leading candidate of the Conservative Party in America. There's something in the water. That's not to criticize him. That's just a fact. And people, trust me, the conservatives who don't like him, this is everywhere in the conservative blogosphere, and his numbers aren't moving yet. But look at the groups who say they won't support him, his better numbers are among the very conservative Republicans. Although you could look at Trump's past anyway, we all change our minds. There's nothing wrong with changing your mind. It might be wrong if you explain why you did it. But only 22% of very conservative Republicans say they could never support him. Moderates and more mainline conservatives have a higher skepticism about Trump. Those are important to watch again. I don't know how many candidates we're going to have, actual candidates, by the time we get to New Hampshire. I assume we'll lose a couple more. Not that many, I don't think. Even though logic or old rules, when, as I was saying earlier today, when I started doing this for a living, you ran for president and lost, you were a loser. Now you run for president and lose, you get a talk show. So the rules aren't the same. So, some of these guys are not, some of these people you think would drop out are not going to drop out as long as they can have the threshold amount of money to keep going and to be in debates. And part of it also is because, again, there are a lot of smart people who have won presidential elections, who have elected governors, who have elected senators, who still have in the back of their head that Trump's going to wake up one morning and say, I'm done, and walk away and give up. I don't see that happening. Why would he's leading in the national polls, he's tied in Iowa, and he's leading here with a pretty healthy margin. Why in the world would you quit right now? But there are a number of people who still have in the back of their mind that someday he's going to wake up and say, I'm done. Or if he loses, if he gets beat in Iowa, he's going to say, I can't lose, I'm not going to lose again, and I'm out. And so some of these people are hanging around just waiting for that to happen. And so I think you're going to have a Congress, but in terms of his potential to grow, I think those numbers are important. Now let's move on to this for a moment. One of the candidates is a socialist. I mean, I remember my first campaign when Dukakis did not want to say I'm a liberal. I don't know if any of you remember back in 1988. Roger Ailes, the guy who now runs Fox News, ran George H.W. Bush's campaign in those days. And, they ran the traditional, hard knuckle, bare knuckle, bloody, you're way more liberal than the country, you're going to raise our taxes and you're weak on defense, and you're going to let all the prisoners out, let all the prisoners out on furlough, for those of you who remember it. And Dukakis hated the labels. The signature line in his convention speech was this election not about ideology, it's about competence. Well, every election's about ideology, Governor, sorry. But I remember being in the back of a crowd at Berkeley late in the campaign. I covered every Dukakis speech for 2 years. So you start wandering the back of the events, because you've heard it all before. And this is like 3 weeks before the election. He says, I am a liberal. That's been for 2 years. But at the end of the campaign, when he did the best, when he finally stopped listening to his consultants and decided, this is who I am, I'm going to be. But Bernie Sanders is a socialist. That used to be, as I said, disqualified. And yet, he's doing just fine. Can he beat Hillary Clinton? Yes, he can. Don't let anybody tell you he can't. She's doing better right now. She has steadied the ship and leveled the ship, and she's leading in Iowa, and it was just a month ago, 6 weeks ago, when you were hearing stories, about she's going to skip New Hampshire, she's going to essentially pull out of New Hampshire. What? Ignore these people who say these things. But he's still, don't give up. This campaign, we're not done. If we've learned anything in 2015, we've had a lot of surprises, so don't think that this is over yet. But it's interesting, but what it tells you is the Democratic Party, as the Republican Party has moved right, and especially in primary elections and in midterm elections, is dominated by its more conservative forces, so too is the Democratic Party moving left. And you have now, to me it's very analogous to what was happening late in the George W. Bush administration. When you have a president, you tend to bite your tongue. If you're in his party or party, and you don't like what's happening, you tend to bite your tongue out of respect, because that's your president. Late in the Bush administration, after Iraq, opposition to the Iraq War, and then the administration, even if you support the invasion, the administration of it, and then Katrina, that's when Bush couldn't get the Republicans to do anything on Social Security. They abandoned him on immigration. You see a little bit of this among liberals and Obama, the things they don't like, the things they think he didn't get to. Because the Republicans are so in his face, there's less of it than at the ends of Bush because of party loyalty. But Sanders is a vehicle for the liberals who think we thought we were going to get more from Barack Obama, and we didn't. And it's a successful vehicle. I say it's not Bill Clinton's Democratic Party, because for those of you old enough to remember, 1992, Bill Clinton ran against his party to a degree. He said we're too beholden to the labor unions. We're too, we need better relationships with business. He had his sister soldier moment. Can you imagine a sister soldier moment in the year of Black Lives Matter? It's a very different, we have a very different dynamic in the country as we did. And I would say it's not even Michael Dukakis' Democratic Party. That the vocal forces in the party are more to the left, of even the 87, 88 cycle. And the disruptive force in that is that Hillary Clinton has moved left. She remembers what happened in 2008. It was mostly about her Iraq vote then. But she remembers going from inevitable to losing. And so whether it's on trade, whether it's on the Keystone Pipeline, whether it's on other things, she has moved left. They believe inside the Clinton campaign that if she's the nominee, she hasn't moved left on anything that's disqualifying. Because she still says on the death penalty, I think we should be much more judicious in using it, but I won't get rid of it. Bernie Sanders says get rid of it altogether. She says I won't do that. They think inside the Clinton campaign she's done it on issues where she's safe with the Obama coalition, the winning coalition, which I'll get to. But I think it's an interesting question. If she's the nominee, we don't know the answer yet. But she moved. We always say the Republicans moved right in the primary and they can't win. And so Hillary Clinton moved left to the point where Republicans can try to use it to disqualify her. We'll find out. This I mentioned at the top. I won't spend much time on it. But just look at the numbers. Hillary Clinton, these are ages today of the active candidates, not on election day or not on inauguration day. But Hillary Clinton is 68 years old today. Bernie Sanders is 74. Donald Trump is 69. Jeb Bush is 62. Rubio and Cruz are the exceptions to this, and trust me, that's what they're going to campaign on. Rubio does this, he's done this from the very beginning, on the generational argument, and it is effective. I have said in this race, I try not, I don't take sides, it's not my job, but Rubio's the best athlete on the field. It's for those of us who are in Red Sox Nation, he's kind of Jackie Bradley. You watch him and you think, wow. You think, wow, great potential. And then he goes, 0 for 100. You think, okay, he can play a mean center field, but he can't hit the curveball. And then he has that streak at the end of the season. Rubio's having a good debate streak right now. Marco Rubio right now is Jackie Bradley in September, and you're thinking he's putting it together. And if he puts it together, can he sustain it? Now the season ended for Jackie Bradley, so we don't know the answer, do we? We don't know the answer for Marco Rubio either. But he's the best athlete on the field. I just don't know if he's ready. I don't know if he's ready for the major leagues. Some candidates grow fast. Some candidates grow more slowly. Some candidates don't grow at all. And we'll find out. But look at the ages. Bill Clinton was 46. Bill Clinton right now is younger than Bernie Sanders. Right now, Bill Clinton is younger than Donald Trump. He hasn't been president for 16 years, 15 years. So it's an interesting question for the country, which has now had this history of, this is a very rare time in our history, 3 consecutive 2-term presidents. We didn't used to do this. We didn't used to do this. And so that in and of itself is a bit of an anomaly that people have decided to keep think about the midterm elections. In the last 10 years, not just during the Obama presidency, go back to the George W. Bush presidency. In the midterm elections, we've had this pendulum of politics in our country, but we've kept our presidents. In history, it's relatively rare to have 3 in a row, 2-term presidents. But Reagan was 69, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, or Donald Trump would all be well old. Ronald Reagan was our oldest president on Inauguration Day. That's Ronald Reagan's age on Inauguration Day. So I think this is an interesting question. The Democrats, unless Mark O'Malley figures something out and figures it out fast, I don't see it happening, but who knows? The Democrats are going to nominate somebody who would be older than Ronald Reagan on Inauguration Day. Does that matter? I don't know. I don't know. We're living longer. 20 years ago, I think it would have mattered. Now, I don't know. But I think it will be, if the Republicans nominate Marco Rubio, you can bet your bottom dollar the generational argument is going to be a big issue. Well, that was the whole thing when Joe Biden was thinking about running. One of the theories was he's going to pledge to run 1 term. One of the other theories was he was going to get Elizabeth Warren to run with him. I have repeatedly, kept my eye on Jerry Brown to see if Jerry Brown, who's older than all these guys too, would come in and run for 1 term, saying, I want to do for the country what I did for California. It'd be a pretty powerful message if he did it. Lucky for Hillary Clinton, he didn't. Because for those of you who remember 1992 at Georgetown, when Jerry says his mind to something, he can be, he's a scrappy dude, and he's fun, and he's a smart guy. And the current Jerry Brown is like Hillary Clinton. I don't think Hillary Clinton's reinvented herself, remade herself, retasked herself so many times in our lifetime. Jerry's, I think, the only other living active politician who's been through so many cycles. And the current Jerry Brown, the Republicans in California, boy, they hate him, but they respect him. They respect him. It's an interesting question. So this is what I obsess about, and I'm going to try to go quickly because I've been talking too long up there and I want to take your question. But if you are in the Clinton campaign, or if you're in a Republican campaign, and you're thinking about the general election, you're looking at the last 2 elections. Because I grew up, and some of the people here who share my pigmentation in their hair grew up when they told us that the Republicans had a lock on the Electoral College. Because of Nixon's Southern strategy, and then Ronald Reagan came in, that the Republicans were essentially started with a lead in presidential politics. Those days are over. The Democrats now start with the lead in presidential politics, and it's because of demographics. It's because of the changing face of America and how it's changing our politics. And if you look at the Obama coalition, it's non-white voters, single women, millennials, and seculars, people who are not strongly, either have no faith at all, or they're just sort of occasionally religious, but religion is not one of their reflexes in politics. That was 51% of the electorate in 2012, of people who fit the Obama coalition. Stan Greenberg, who's a very smart Democratic pollster, has scrubbed the numbers, and he thinks that's going to be 63% in 2016. I think that might be a bit optimistic. Stan's a Democrat. He's supposed to, sort of make his case for Democrats, but he's also one of the best in the business. He's one of the smartest in the business. If you go back to the Reagan Democrat days, and when Reagan was winning Macomb County and those places, Stan was one of the pioneers in studying voters. He gets economic anxiety. He gets these voters, and his research is going to be as high as 63% in 2016.
Is that 63% of people who will actually vote?
Of the electorate, yes. He believes that the people who actually turn out will be 63%. Now, if that happens, it's a Democratic blowout. I don't care if the Democrats nominate Mickey Mouse. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I would say about 2008, Mickey Mouse would have won the 2008 election. If Mickey Mouse were the Democratic nominee and John McCain were the Republican nominee, Mickey Mouse would have won the election. The Democrats were going to win that year. But the country was mad at Iraq, mad about Katrina, questioned the competence of the Bush administration. It was a 2-term president. It was time to turn the page. Now, the Obama campaign, to their credit, A, they beat a very formidable candidate in the primary, and B, they added North Carolina, they added Indiana, they turned Virginia, they turned Colorado. I'm not disrespecting what they did. They did a lot of things to expand the Democratic coalition, to turn people out, and to turn red states blue. But they were going to win. They could have won eating peanuts and watching football. They would have won the election. They would have just won the election, but they would have won the election. The Democrats were going to win that year. So even if Stan's numbers are a bit optimistic, if you look at the last 2 elections, it's pretty obvious. Republicans have a demographic crisis at the presidential level. And look at these numbers. In 2004, the last Republican to win, Bush gets 40+% of the Latino vote, and he wins Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, and Florida. One other places too, but just look at those states. The states where Nevada and New Mexico used to be swing states in presidential politics. Unless and until the Republicans figure out their problem with Latinos. And I'm not going to say that's just immigration. Right now, it's largely immigration. There are some conservatives who say that, we can figure it out. we can still be for the positions they have on immigration and figure it out with Latino voters. I'm open-minded, prove it, I want to see it. But however they get there, unless and until they fix that problem, if you look at the population, Nevada is in the high 20% now Latino. New Mexico's half. 47% I think of the electorate last time was Latino in New Mexico, and that number's growing exponentially. It's gone. It's a blue state. And they're small, relatively small states, but these used to be the swing states in close elections. They're blue. Colorado is one of the most, Colorado and North Carolina right now are the two, what I think are the two states that are they're like perfect. If you look at if you look for a 50-50 rock and stock and robots election, and the demographics, North Carolina and Colorado are the two that you got to fight. You got to get in the trenches every day and fight. But Colorado's trending blue at the presidential level because of Latino votes. Florida is a little different because you have the Cuban population. The diversity of the Latino population is very different than many other states because of the Cuban population. But the Mexican, Guatemalan population is growing, and the role of the Cuban, the influence of the Cuban population is declining, and the younger generations of Cubans don't vote like the older. They're not reflexive Republicans like the older generation. So that's what's happening there. Republicans, 31%, 27%. 2008 and 2012, and if you can look at the Electoral College numbers, they speak for themselves. In many ways, the names of the candidates don't matter. And another thing that's not up here is that the Asian vote, which is 2% in Virginia, you think, oh, it's 2%, it doesn't matter. In 50-50 election, 2% matters. All other things being equal, every vote, politics, we like to make it complicated. I like to make it complicated so I can tell my bosses that they pay me a lot of money. It's the first math you learn, it's arithmetic. You get one more than the other guy, you win. And so if every vote counts in a close election, the Asian vote used to be a small business, entrepreneurial, conservative vote. Lower taxes, pro-business. It is now tracking exactly the Latino vote in the last two presidential elections. And I think it's largely because of the tone of the Republican Party. Not so much about whether it's build a wall or amnesty or whatever, but there's a tone from some candidates that the Democrats have exploited. It's not just the Republicans. The Democrats have smartly, maybe cynically you might think, depending on your political perspective, but the Democrats have seen this opening and used it to communicate in a way that has communicated the message that they don't like you because you look different than them. And it has worked. It has worked. The swing in the Asian vote is, in my view, as significant as if that Latino vote hardens from where George W. Bush could get 40+%. If the Republicans can barely crack 30 or can't crack 30, just go to census.gov. Don't believe the idiot from Washington. Go to census.gov and look at the numbers. Again, the candidates don't matter. They almost don't matter. If the demographics are so overwhelmingly against you, it doesn't matter if you put it in the ballot. This is why this is a fascinating question to me. The Republicans did an autopsy after 2012, and they said, we're going to get this right. We're going to pass immigration reform. We're going to do things. We get it. We're going to do things to fix this problem. Their base doesn't see it this way. And look, whether you agree or disagree, everybody gets one vote. And these people believe this with a passion. And it's both sides. If you want to disabuse them of the notion that we should build a wall, then you better have a better plan. Because they believe it, they want it, and their opinion counts just as much as anybody else in this room. I don't know if you're with them or against them, or if we had an immigration debate here, we could probably get pretty feisty here pretty quick. But they get one vote too. And in the Republican primary, their votes matter. And so when Trump's talking about a wall, we're going to have, terms like Operation Wetback are going to show up in Democratic campaign ads, trust me, because the Democrats know what it will do. And you see it. So the Republican lock on the Electoral College that I grew up with not long ago is picked. It's gone. And the Democrats now have an advantage. And that changes a lot about how they do it. Let's go through some of these other things very quickly. The Democrats should not assume, though, it's automatic, even though they have a demographic advantage. Look at these numbers. New Hampshire was actually ahead of the country in people disaffiliating with the parties and becoming independents. It's part of your tradition. You don't like to be told, you're part of the party, you're supposed to have positions, which is a good thing. But it's now becoming national. 20% of the people in this country self-ID as strong Democrats, and 16% self-ID as strong Republicans. This is from NBC Wall Street Journal poll. Everybody else is up for grabs. That doesn't, people lean. They lean one way or the other. If you're an independent, you're probably a Democratic independent or a Republican independent, or a more liberal independent or a conservative independent. You pick the terminology you're close to, but you probably more often than not start by looking at a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate, because that's your reflex. You're more open-minded maybe, you're willing to split tickets and cross over more, but you probably have a reflex. There's very few actually true independents who have no clue. heading into an election cycle, where they're going to start. Doesn't mean where you're going to finish, but where you're going to start. But 26% of the country identify themselves as liberals, 37% as conservatives, 39% as moderates. It's a stew. It's a stew of different opinions. The point about this, the disruption is not to replace polarization. I find these numbers fascinating because we're about to start voting. 43% of Americans want a Democratic president. 44% want a Republican president. 45% want a Democratic Congress. 45% want a Republican Congress. Welcome to the last 25 years of our lives. We have a pretty evenly divided country. And that's part of it. We can insult, and it's fun. All we want is the dysfunctional children in Washington. I call Congress a daycare center, and I'm afraid the children are going to sue me for slander, and they have a pretty strong case. Some of it is the dysfunction, but some of it is, this is what the American people keep sending. Collectively, when you add up the 435 House districts, this is what you get. You get an evenly divided Congress. The guys who campaign saying anything Obama wants, I'm against, we're supposed to applaud them, right? When they actually keep their campaign promises. That's what's happening. They're doing what they said they were going to do. And this is the polarization. So I'm not sure, everybody wants change, but everybody has a different definition of what change should be. This I find fascinating. Disgust and disruption, and there's plenty of it. They don't mean disinterest. People actually think this election means something. And I think that's important as we get closer to voting. 42% say who wins the presidency will make a great deal of difference in their life. 19% say it will make quite a bit. 20% say it will make some. Just add that up. You get to 80, you're over 80% of people who thinks it makes at least some difference, and you're over 60% with quite a bit or very huge, very significant difference in life. So people are invested in this election. They think it's about something. As disgusted as they are with Washington, as disgusted as they are with politics, as distrustful as they are of anybody with a title, they actually understand that there's something at play here, and they're into it. Only 17% of people think it's very little different. But I think that tells you something, that I don't know what turnout's going to be. We've had ebbs and flows. Obama brought it up. Ross Perot brought it up. If you want to go back to that year, that dropped down a little bit. But the interest level, despite people being all the negative emotions, anger, frustration, disappointment, whatever, the interest level and the idea that it matters is quite significant. So now what? And I'm done finally. The disruptors, without a doubt, Sanders, Trump, Carson, to a degree Fiorina as well, without a doubt changing the race and changing. I don't know if Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee or if Dr. Carson will be the Republican nominee or how far Sanders will go. But I do know that they've already changed the race. The exit of Walker, the exit of Perry, the impetus on the other candidates to try to somehow, Jeb Bush, I was the outsider who shook up Tallahassee. Everybody has to try to find a way to say, I'm different, I'm an outsider, I would be different, I will fight Washington, I will change Washington. They have changed the race in dramatic ways, including sending a couple of very credible candidates to the exits already. The debates are driving the horse race for now. Some of us were talking about this right beforehand. Your state is always one of the greatest laboratories of American democracy. Donald Trump doesn't come here that often. He doesn't do a lot of town halls. He doesn't do Dunkin' Donuts. He doesn't shake hands. He's winning in your state by a pretty sizable margin right now. When the clock ticks closer, does New Hampshire's DNA kick in and they say, sorry, dude, if you don't let us kick the tires, you don't get our votes? Or does the national debate dynamic drive the race, and can he win New Hampshire without campaigning New Hampshire style? If he does, it will change. It at least will be, I don't know if it'll be a one-year exception or whatever, but it will test the tradition of your primary. And it'll test modern campaigning because of all these debates and the national effect and the way the media business has changed. I think that's an open question. But right now, the debates are driving the horse race. Probably Fiorina comes up, there's no debate for a month, probably Fiorina drops. Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz have strong debate performances, up they come. Hillary Clinton, at a time when she seems a little wobbly, has a very strong first debate by all accounts. Her numbers solidify. We have a national dynamic in the election right now where we used to have much more of and you guys know better than I do, Iowa says left, New Hampshire says right. Iowa says blue, New Hampshire says red. There's almost a competition between Iowa and New Hampshire. You made your choice, we think it was stupid. This is what we're going to do. And that's fine. I mean, that's fine. I don't belittle it. It's just that's always been part of the process, and we'll see if that's the case this time. If you're in my business, this part is very important. Don't be so sure about the old rules and the lessons of history. My reflex is always, well, I know how this is going to play because or this is going to work. Just stop. Just stop. And this is the most important lesson. Because my business is fractured and has become, there's so many niches of it and there's so many different layers of it now, everybody wants to write the last chapter. It's like, you don't cheat the flag of the book. You don't go read the last book. It's a great book. Why don't you do that? Why don't you do that? Read the book. Read the book. You'll get to the ending eventually. But in my business, there are some people who are tempted to say this is how it's going to end up. To the point about, and a lot of people are strategists too. People are saying Trump's going to get out. Based on what? Based on what? Because he doesn't fit the way they look at things. So why are we trying to write the last chapter? We're still in the first. Let's have fun with this. It's an amazing year. Strange things are happening. Exciting things are happening. Some of you might find them scary. Some of you might find them wonderful. That's the virtue and love and wonder of democracy. But I think sometimes we're in too much of a hurry to write the last chapter. And we're still at the first, and it's a lot of fun. I'd be happy to take your questions. Please.
For a guy who says he can't give a good speech, you did 46 tremendous minutes.
Wow, I went too long. And you didn't give me the hook. You promised me you were going to throw a water balloon at me.
Two things I want you to comment on, but I have a question. The commentary things are, Latino vote you said in 2012 is down to 31% the Republicans got. Doesn't Rubio change that because he's Cuban, he's fluent in Spanish? The other thing is, Donald Trump speaks in very short, simplified sentences. About like a 9-year-old. Elaine said on NPR last week. I'd like you to talk about how that's going to appeal to the general electorate if he is a nominee. But here's my question. Okay. You moderate inside politics. John Dickerson does Face the Nation and so forth. When politicians go on your shows, or like Carly Fiorina did 2 weeks ago during the Republican debate in Des Moines, Gerard Baker, the editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal, said, Ms. Fiorina, during the presidency of Barack Obama, 107,000 jobs average creation per month. Under Bill Clinton, 270,000 jobs a month. Under George W. Bush, only 13,000 jobs a month. How do you explain that the democracy, the country in the last 25 years has done so much better under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents, and that goes all the way back to World War II, 2/3 of the time? She said, I agree, things are terrible and the Democrats are doing an awful job. Why didn't Baker say, lady, hold on, I asked you a question, stop the BS and answer it. You guys never do.
Well, I would say we never do. And I don't want to speak for other people. My current show, I don't have politicians on. I started State of the Union, our Sunday franchise. It used to be Late Edition, was the predecessor of that show. And now Kenny Crowley did it after me, and now Jake Tepper does it. And that's our vehicle for candidate interviews and newsmaker interviews and members of Congress too, not just presidential candidates. And Jake does a fine job, and I think Jake did a spectacular job with the first Republican debate. Nobody's perfect in this business, and I am chief among the imperfect. And I want to raise my hand and say that. I will say that, and I'm not trying to get you to strike up a band and a sympathy song for us. It's really hard when you have 8 and 10 candidates up there. I agree with your point about Gerald Baker's a damn good Charles, and that was a good debate. That was a good debate. You get to a point in the debate where I think they did a much better job than the CNBC panel did. You do get to a point in the debate where you're in like the clock is ticking and you're looking, and I didn't get to these ladies. But my question, and you've got to make a tactical decision. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know. There could have been a producer in Gerald Baker's ear. He's a Wall Street Journal guy who's a partner with Fox Business Channel. The Fox Business Channel runs the debate, and I'm not criticizing Fox Business Channel. Again, I think they did a fine job. But I don't know if somebody said in his ear, move on. Or don't ask a follow-up, we need to move on. So I don't know. I don't know the specific answer to that thing. I get completely that one of the things I have told our people who ask me for advice, or anybody who asks me for advice moderating debates, is do it differently than I did. No, is that study and prepare, but don't become hostage to your preparations, because then you're not listening. And if they do, and don't let them get away with it. You're right. Sometimes it's in a debate like that when you've got 10 candidates and you're trying to be as fair as you can with the time. Fair is subjective. Trump and Carson, they didn't in that debate actually, but in most debates, Trump and Carson are way ahead of the polls. They're going to get a little more time. They've kind of earned it, and they deserve the scrutiny. But they may have been pressured to move on. I think it's something like that. But in a Sunday show, it's different in a Sunday show setting. My point on that is I have what I call the 3-time rule. You just go back. You didn't answer the question. You didn't answer the question. That's not what I asked you. Try to do it politely. You don't have to be a jerk about it. And then if they still won't do it, then you decide, all right, I'm not going to ask you another question. We're going to just sit here. We're going to sit here and just look at each other for 10 minutes until we go to commercial break. You can do that if you want. I call that stunt-dummy journalism. There are some people who will do that, or some variation of that. I think if you say, well, sir, it's not what I asked you. Maybe you didn't hear me. Let me reread the question to you. Let me re-ask the question to you. After 3 times, the person watching gets it. And I think the voters have a lot more common sense than we give them credit for sometimes. They will figure out she's ducking, she's dodging, and they will either give her credit for that, or they will hold it against her. The different voters will view it different ways. But I do think we should push back politely, but push back, you're not answering the question, that's not what I asked you. And in the Sunday show setting, that's our job. And we should not say, oh, but then I'm not going to get to the Medicare question, or I'm not going to get to the taxes question, because that is not only a test of her answer on that specific question, it is more, I believe in presidential politics especially, more than what they say on any specific policy question. It's their temperament, it's their character, it's how they make decisions, it's their judgment. Those are the things you're looking for, in a presidential candidate for the most part, because most of us are old enough to realize that, we didn't know 9/11 was going to happen. Nobody knew it was going to happen, but who's our president when something like that happens? We live in this polarized electorate. I think most of us should understand that whoever wins the presidential election is going to have a pretty evenly divided Congress. And so if you want things to get done, that's a fair question. That's as fair or as good a question for a candidate as, what do you means testing Social Security? What's your age? Where would you give to get? And so those, I think we should push back, because that's taking people inside the thought process of the candidate, which to me is as important, and in some cases more important than, what's the retirement age, what's the means testing, who's your tax plan thing. And you're right that we don't do it enough, because some people get, I have to ask all 10 of these questions or else I fail. Sometimes, I go back to when I first came to CNN, I used to sometimes roll my eyes at Larry King, who would ask these, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be questions, and I was like, what's he doing, what's he doing? There's actually, then you realize, if you mix it up, there's huge value in those questions, because the candidates don't expect them, and it's not what they prepared for, and so they take you inside their thought process when you ask them. And so I think you should mix it up more, but we should do a better job of pressing back. To your other points, to the Marco Rubio point, Marco Rubio has to figure out whether he's the old Marco Rubio on immigration, who's going to stand up and say to conservative voters, like Governor Bush does, again, agree or disagree, this is my position, this is what I think. Marco Rubio was part of a bill with Chuck Schumer and Democrats to get a path to citizenship. Not a path to legal status, a path to citizenship. Now he says the country's not ready to go that far, which is fine. If he wants to say, that was my position, the country's not ready to go that far, so let's try to get something done back up. That's a perfectly reasonable position to take in politics on any issue. We can't get this far, but let's try to do something. But he doesn't. If you watched in the last debate when that issue was coming up, they didn't get to him. They didn't get to him, and he was the happiest man on that stage because he knows with the Republican base, he does not want to talk about that. I do think that having a spine is part of electing a president, and he's done very well lately. I think he's going to have to figure out his answer on immigration, which he's trying to duck it to a degree. But he's not going to get through it. Trust me, they're coming after him. To the Trump's, studies have shown he speaks at, I think you might have given him a little credit there, at what grade level he tends to speak at. But it's working now. Yeah, I don't know. Look, Trump is the weakest. If you run hypothetical general election matchups right now on the top 5 or 6 Republicans against Sanders and Clinton, Trump's the weakest Republican candidate. Non-white voters know what he's saying, and they will not vote for him. And there's some other, he is a bigger gender gap than any other candidate too.
Hi, my name is Patrick McJohn. I have to go up front with my bias. I'm a Liberal Democrat, and I'm also an immigrant from Northern Ireland whose uncle and cousin were in the IRA and did jail time. So I'm very sensitive to being allowed to come to America and have a wonderful life here and seeing what's happening with people that are trying to get away from a country that's exploding on them. And I'm kind of disheartened today to see that 41 Democrats voted in the House of Representatives along with Republicans to tighten up immigration from these countries. And I'm just wondering if that's going to blow up against the Democratic Party who's trying to get the Latino vote. Is this going to be able to turn, will they be able to turn that against them and say, hey, wait a minute, you're not pro-immigration. Look at all you guys, you Democrats, you voted against it.
That's an interesting question. If the Syrian refugee issue, because you're telling people, we don't want you, do people process that in the same way as they process Latinos? I don't know the answer to that. I think it's an interesting way to look at the conversation. I think in the short term, the politicians think no. The voters will process it differently because they will make the terrorism argument and the safety argument, and that tends to, forgive the phrase, Trump other issues. But I think that's their calculation. Now, I also think that this is the first chapter of this debate, and what you often see from politicians is self-interest and survival as their first instinct. And in the first moments of this, when the president overseas was essentially telling Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, looking in the mirror, nobody asked your parents what religion they were when they came from Cuba. And now you're saying we should have a litmus test for people. A lot of people thought that was unpresidential. They're under the president's skin a little bit on this one, and he's on the way out. And presidents are different on the way out than they are in the end. This is an interesting time. As a student of politics, he's really fun to watch. There are times when it's like, oh, where's he going here? We see a different Obama, and some of you think for the better, some of you think for the worse. But presidents, on their, when they know they're not on the ballot again, the psychology changes, and it gets really fun if you do what I do for a living, to get on the roller coaster with them. But you have your governor here. When this first happened, in the first 24 hours, it was all Republicans saying no. And so the Democrats had the us and them argument. This is un-American. We have to help these people. But then, your governor went. Chuck Schumer, very prominent Democratic senator, went. He wants to get the Senate in 2016. There's a Bloomberg poll out today that says, it's 53 to 28 or something like that, the American people. That's today. It's today. An iconic city in the world just got blown up. And so I completely get the hit the pause button. I actually think that's almost responsible. But wait a minute. Let's stop for a minute and check what we're doing. And is it good enough? Is our vetting let's go back and check. Is our vetting process good enough? And if it's not, if it is, great. We're doing a great job. Fine, let's keep going. If it's not, or if we learn something from Paris that you want to change it, that's responsible. Democrat, Republican, Independent. I think everybody would say, okay, they're going to hit the, if somebody's like days away from leaving a detention center somewhere in Europe and coming to the United States, and we say, well, we need you to stay another week or two. That's horrible for that family. I'm not I'm not dismissing that, but I think most Americans say, okay, a week or two, we're going to sort this out. That's fine. The question is, where are we in a month or two? And I think that's the question. How much the president says he'll veto this bill if Congress sends it to him. Will he? Or will he go back to them? This is a huge test for Paul Ryan. I've known Paul Ryan since he was carrying bags and helping Jack Kemp write speeches. He's a good guy. I'm not siding with his politics. It's not my job. He's a good guy. But Boehner was a good guy. Boehner was a governing conservative. Paul Ryan is a Jack Kemp. We have to expand the tent. If people of color don't understand Republican principles, we're doomed as a party. He gets that. Now, how long is his leash? That's what did Boehner, and we'll see what happens with Ryan. I thought Ryan's position has not been no. The Cruz position and the Trump position. Trump says our president's an idiot. Trump actually said today that Barack Obama is a risk to American national security. He's a risk. He's not just wrong. I don't have policy disagreement. He's a risk to American national security. It's an interesting campaign we're in. But I completely get the pause. The question is, can Ryan navigate out of this? And I don't. But that's an interesting point. The tone of the immigration debate has turned away even conservative Latinos who don't like illegal immigration. Some of whom support a wall. They just say they don't like the tone. If you look at, I go to focus groups and I study, when people do focus groups, everything's recorded now. I watch these things all the time, and you watch people say, I'm a Republican. I can't vote for this guy. Or I vote Republican for mayor and city council and maybe governor, but I'm not going to vote for one of these guys in Washington because of the tone. It's not just what they're saying. It's not just the policy. It's the tone of it. But it's an interesting question. I think it's something to keep an eye on. In the short term, this is a terrorism question, and they, again, they're going by the old rules. They're going by the old rules. You can ask John Kerry about this in late 2004 when George W. Bush decided to go back to talking terrorism in the final weeks of the campaign. That was our last close election. That was actually, people forget how close that election was in 2004. And so the old rules tell you default to terrorism. It works. We'll see.
You ended right where I was gonna ask the question, which is on the slide you didn't mention the Paris effect, and now another tragedy happened with a lot of people killed and maimed, with more terrorism in the world, which is happening more and more, and Americans are beginning to understand to some degree the threat. with terrorism increasing, which candidates do you think that will help or hurt in the presidential election? And if you, I don't know if you're allowed, but if you're allowed, who would you put your money on now to actually win, if you were to win the election? And my last thing is just a comment. I believe that the reason we have such a crowded horse race now that we've never had in my lifetime is because this is the first presidential election in 16 cycles since Eisenhower won in '52 that either a sitting president or vice president is not running. And in my lifetime, that has never happened.
I agree to that last one, although I do think to a degree, especially since Joe Biden found out, and the way, the way the president has handled this more privately than publicly, and the way the president's team has handled this, and where they all went to Clinton pretty early on. She's kind of the de facto, in an odd way, she's running as a vice president, but in some ways, structurally, not necessarily her message, but structurally, she has that kind of support. See those two things in the back of the room called cameras? Sorry, I don't give predictions. I will say that I don't think we're done with surprises. And I will say that if you look at the focus group and if you talk to the people I trust the most who do the whole portfolio, they're not hostage to polling data, but they take polling data and then they talk to voters and then they look at other things that are happening and they study things that are non-political things that are happening, but that are political things, the state of the economy, people's, the Michigan consumer. One of the best presidential determinant indicators is the University of Michigan's Consumer Confidence Survey. Google it, look at where the Michigan Consumer Confidence Survey is and what happens in a presidential election. Some of us are political scientists, look at the unemployment rate, look at this, look at that. One of the more reliable ones in the last 25 years has been the University of Michigan Consumer Confidence. How people feel, how do they feel? What's their how they feel about their life and their future and their kids increasingly. I think for the last couple of election cycles, and this is again one of the potential strengths of a Rubio, is that the American dream question is front and center. Are your kids going to be better? That was when I was growing up. That was a yes. I was going to do better than my parents. I mean, they literally died to give us, the King kids, a better life. And it was a no-brainer. That's a real question now. So I mean, this is a fascinating question. I don't know the answer because I don't know if the old rules apply. It should help Hillary Clinton, right? In the Democratic primary, this should be the separator now. She's stabilized anyway. With all due respect, Senator Sanders, I've been Secretary of State. I was the first lady. I was around my husband when all this happened. I was a senator. I know how this works. I have more experience at this than you do. I've traveled the world. I know these leaders. Now, Republicans will say, what did she do as Secretary of State? What are her accomplishments? Name 3 things that she did that worked or that made a difference. So that's the debate. But in the short term, we should have these conversations in the box we live in. The box we live in at the moment is the Democratic primary and the Republican primary. And that's what's being litigated at the moment. Now, what gets litigated will have an impact on the general election, but those are the decisions being made now. And sure, instinct tells you it should help the candidate who has a deeper resume, who is, again though, you're talking about a Democratic primary. How did she lose the last one? She voted for a war. Bernie Sanders today in his "Why I'm a Democratic Socialist," defining Democratic Socialist, said, I want to beat ISIS. But I'm not going to send our kids into a fool's errand just to look tough. I'm not going to send them just because people say we have to be tough. So I don't know the answer. Reflex, it says, resume should help. This is what you're going to hear. You're already hearing, and turn on your television, or you probably don't. You're probably smart, but turn on your television and your radio here, and there's a John Kasich super PAC up. Saying he was on the Foreign Relations Committee. He's the chief executive. Essentially, I don't think it mentions Carson and Trump by name, but essentially saying, we're at war. We're at war, and you can't trust, we have, his argument essentially is, we have a president now, Kasich's argument, Super PAC's argument, is we have a president now who had 0 experience at this, and look what we got. Speaking to Republican voters, why would you put Trump or Carson there? This is the argument Jeb Bush is making, that you need experience, you need an executive, you need somebody who can sit around and make decisions. If you haven't heard, this is a joke, kind of, Lindsey Graham is running for president for one reason and one reason only, because he thinks we need a commander-in-chief who knows what he's doing. So you're going to hear this. This is going. Will this be? How big of an issue will this be in November when you're picking a president, not picking a nominee? I don't know. If this fades a little bit, we'll go back to the economy. the economy is almost always the #1 issue in presidential politics, and these other issues sort of compete for, how close can you get to be the #2 issue. But for a couple of cycles after 9/11, this issue was higher. It ran equal and sometimes trumped the economy. With certain voters, if you're in a close election, we tend to overdo these things, but we could have this, were there really security moms, replacing soccer moms? But there's targeting to people. If you need to peel off a little bit of votings, those things happen. We haven't talked about that, the micro data, the big data, and the way campaigns can, target. The two of you could live under the same roof, and you get different messages from campaigns when you log on your emails or you go to Facebook or whatever, because they know, they know where to get you. They know how to peel you off. But for the next couple of weeks, this is going to be a driving issue, if not the driving issue in the race. What do we do about this? And it will have an impact on the primary process. I don't know where we'll be by the time we get to the general election, but I do think that you're going to see the next Republican debate is December 15th. There's a little plug. It's on CNN. It's live from Las Vegas. Anybody want to come play the tables? Let's go. And now my friend and colleague Wolf Blitzer is moderating, and A, this will be an issue anyway. B, Wolf has a great understanding of this part of the world and cares a lot about foreign policy. This is going to be a big deal. And you're going to see, you are going to see Jeb Bush and John Kasich and Chris Christie, go after Trump, saying, you're a hothead. You can't just say you're going to bomb the shit out of them. Excuse my language. Presidents aren't supposed to say, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. And by the old rules, presidents aren't supposed to say, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. But do the old rules apply? I don't know. Those are the 3 least spoken words in Washington. I don't know. But I don't know. History tells you people are going to say, "Ooh, that's not a president." Last time I checked, he's leading in the polls. And those are polls of people who are going to vote in the New Hampshire primary or in the national election. So at the moment, do they like that? Do they think it's presidential? Probably not. But are they so disillusioned, disenfranchised, distrustful of the other guys that they're giving them a pass or processing it in a different way, or not making it disqualifying? They might cringe a little bit. I love watching Trump events. Forgive me for digressing, but watch Trump events. When he did this 95-minute rant the other day, watch the people behind him. Forget him. I mean, he was talking about Ben Carson's story about I tried to stab this guy, and he came out to belt buckles, and he started doing it. Watch the people. Some of them are laughing, some of them are like mesmerized, and some of them are like, I was like, Scotty, energize, get me out of here. I love just watching the people. But I don't know how they're going to vote. We are in a, forget the rules. Your history tells you that when a 2-term governor of Florida, whose dad was president and brother was president, says, I know a little bit more about this than you do, Mr. Trump, you would think that if you're an undecided voter out there, you would say, well, I want to listen to this. Or does that voter say, Bush? To me, that's a 4-letter word. I'm not listening to you. To the graph I showed you earlier, the more they hear, the less they like. So we're in a brave new world. But it is going to be, and it should be, I think, a pretty big issue for the next several weeks, and then we'll see what happens.
I think we have time for one more.
Sure.
Of the 3 Republican outsiders, Trump, Carson, and Fiorina, I would argue that Fiorina is the better debater. She has the business experience Carson has. She seems to be more articulate, have a better understanding of the issues, but she's not gaining traction like Trump and Carson. Why do you think the outsider label hasn't helped her in the same way it's helped?
Everything in life about these things is subjective. Remember that. Your opinion may not be shared. Maybe shared by half the people in the room, may not be shared by others. I do think that she has done herself well in the debates. I do think sometimes you're looking for the second beat, that she comes very well prepared. She's very feisty. I talked earlier about, do candidates grow? Can Marco Rubio grow? If you go back and look at Carly Fiorina running against Barbara Boxer just 2 years ago, and Carly Fiorina now, again, just as a student of the process and a student of the game, you have to tip your hat to her. She was a horrible candidate. She was a miserable candidate. She just wasn't good. She came across as grumpy and mean, and I dare you for that question. And now she's just got, in terms of the communicator, and starting here, then to the camera, whether it's the mechanics of communicating or the messaging of communicating, she has grown by leaps and bounds. I do think that part of it is there's 2 different things at play. You have Trump and Carson who are doing this 2 very different ways. Trump is, everybody knows him. Everybody knows him. He has 100% name ID. That's a gift in politics. You know, nobody knows Carly Fiorina. I mean, a national audience does not know Carly Fiorina. They might kind of vaguely remember her name, or they've heard her once or twice. Oh, she was the woman at HP. Or maybe if you're a political junkie, oh, she ran against a boxer. But you don't know Carly Fiorina. So this is still getting to know you. And when she impresses you, you think, pretty good. Maybe you go online and look a little bit more, or maybe you wait for the next debate. But if there's not a debate, she disappears. And if you're not a New Hampshire voter and she's not here doing your town hall, she disappears. So she drops in the national polls because when they're calling people in Kansas and Oklahoma and other places, they haven't seen her for a couple of weeks and they forget about her. Trump has 100% name ID, plus he is, breaking all the rules, and I don't say that as a criticism, and disrupting everything, and that's how he's getting attention. And a lot of people think, Washington's the China shop. He's the bull. They want the bull to break all the China because they think the place isn't working. And I think part of them think that you have to be careful how you say these things. And so it's certainly, I used to say, and this is a mistake on my part to say it this way, that in some ways, Trump's the hand grenade. They just want to roll him into the room, and just, and that's the wrong metaphor to use because of current events, and it's probably not right to use anyway. But he is the bull in the China shop. They want him to come in. They want to break all the glass. They want to break the Republican glass. They want to break the Democratic glass. They just want to break all the glass and start over because they think it's not working. And that's a bigger appeal because he has this broader appeal. Carson's very different. Carson is new to much of America. But if you travel the country, and this is one of the reasons Carson's not doing so well here in New Hampshire, it's just by your demographics. Back to the point about demographics. This is not a state with a large evangelical Christian population. But if you know an evangelical Christian, ask them how long they've known the name Dr. Ben Carson. Go to Iowa, go to Kansas, go to Colorado, go to small town America where you do have an evangelical community. They've been buying his books for 15 years. When I travel, one of the first things I do is, if it's in a state where the evangelical vote is a swing vote or an important vote, is you just go to small churches. And again, for some people, faith is very important in their politics. For some people, they completely disconnect their faith from their politics because they think, that's the way they're supposed to do it. Everybody makes their own decisions, and no matter the way you view things, you should always respect the other side and how they think, whether you agree or disagree. One of the things I always do is go to these small churches, and most small evangelical churches, they have the church part and they have an education aspect to it. There's a lot of homeschooling or local schooling done in these evangelical communities. They have bookstores. It's one of the ways. It's one of the ways the churches make money, and it's one of the ways they educate their communities. They have, and Carson's books have been front and center in these bookstores for as long as I can remember, at least 15 years. They know who he is. So he may not have 100% national ID, but he has very high ID among a key slice of the Republican Party. And so he starts with a base, and now his challenge is to grow. Trump starts with everybody knows him. His challenge is to not lose them. Everybody knows him, and then how high does that number will never vote for him go? How high does the number, the more I hear, the less I listen go? It's a very different challenge. Carson's trying to grow from a decent base. Carly Fiorina is trying to grow from nothing. From nothing essentially. And for someone who started at zero or sub-zero, she's done a pretty good job. But I don't see, what's the next step? I think the next debate is pretty critical for her because just by nature of the calendar, people are about to vote. And once people start voting, debates matter less because then we're into sports. Somebody's winning and somebody's losing. And winning and losing impacts raising money. Winning and losing impacts the psychology of how people process you. Some people will rally to a candidate when they lose, because that's their guy or that's their gal, and you're going to help them rally back. Other people, if you're closely divided between two candidates, one of them's winning and the other one's losing, psychology might take you to the winner. If it's a totally even call, you want to get on the team that has a chance to win. So we're about to be at that moment. This has been really fun so far in the campaign season. It's been a really interesting year, and we're learning a lot, and we're learning a lot of new things about what the American people want and how things are different this time. But this has all been warm-ups. And it's about to get really fun. And when it gets fun, people in New Hampshire know this better than anybody. Once it starts, it's a blur. It's a blur. Somebody asked me, I was at an event earlier today, and somebody was asking me about the final couple weeks of the New Hampshire primary in 1992. Fun days, right, George? When Bill Clinton went from God to dead. And back, when you're in that phase, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and then especially in the Republican race, they changed the calendar this time. The Republicans changed the rules, they have fewer debates, they changed the calendar after the last cycle to try to help clean up their process, to help them get to a nominee faster. Boy, did they wish they could go back and do it over. I think, again, no disrespect to Senator Sanders, who I still think may well surprise us. and this is a key state in his effort to do that. But you can look at the data. I'm not saying this will happen. You can look at the data and make a pretty strong case that the Democratic race could be over pretty quickly. If she wins Iowa and New Hampshire, then she's going on to places, where there are non-white voters, then it's done. But if Sanders has to win at least one of the first two. Some argue he has to win both of the first two. Who makes these rules? But he has to win somewhere in the first two to keep going. So don't try to write the last chapter, but you can lay out a strong case from the data that the Democratic race might be over pretty quick. I think the Republican race is going on for a while. And that makes it really interesting because states that have never mattered before, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, Tennessee, you want to be the guy for a path to citizenship on the ballot in Alabama in a Republican primary? Good luck to you. And so it's going to change the race because Romney lost all those states. Santorum won all those states, but it was over. Huckabee won all those states against McCain, but it was over. But they changed the pace and the rules this time, and so the message candidate on the Republican side that has always emerged after the establishment has a nominee, and then there's a little bit of buyer's remorse in these conservative states, and you get a message candidate for a month or so, and then the nominee, then Illinois, New York, and other places happen, and boom, it's over. The message candidate is never in the lead from a delegate perspective. Are they a message candidate anymore? Or are they the leader? When after the March 1st primaries, they have a vote load more delegates than the establishment guy. So it's a whole new world. It's a whole new world. And to this, it's the argument Cruz makes that if we would actually nominate a conservative, we would win. A more conservative. I don't know if he's right. I can look at the data and tell you he's crazy and he's wrong. I can look at the data and say, okay, if he could, draw to an inside straight, maybe. Turn out more white people in Wisconsin and Minnesota, but maybe. I don't know. But we may answer that question because of the way they rewrote the calendar. They rewrote the calendar, essentially, the name's not right, but they rewrote the calendar and the rules to help Governor Romney lock up the nomination earlier. Whoever Governor Romney was going to be at this cycle, that guy. Ain't gonna work that way. Sometimes you mess with the wiring, you don't get exactly what you wanted. I think they want me to wrap up, but if anybody else has a question, if you want to sneak one more in, stand up and shout it before they turn the electricity off, otherwise I'll hang around on the side here. You can ask me. I missed the first one, right? George, were you here? I was reincarnated after that life. Thanks very much.